A chain-link fence topped with military wire cuts across the summit ridge of Mount Hermon at 2,814 meters above sea level. Israeli defense forces control multiple sectors of that peak today. Tourists reach the ski slopes below. The summit itself is another matter. The rock beneath those restricted fences is the same rock the Book of Enoch identifies by name as the precise location where 200 watchers descended, gathered, and swore an oath together. An oath that changed everything that came after. Banned, buried, declared non-scripture. Church councils removed it from the accepted canon, and for over 1,000 years it vanished from Western theological sight entirely. One community held on to it. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved the Book of Enoch inside its monastic libraries, and when the scholar James Bruce carried 3 manuscript copies back to Europe in 1773, the text re-entered the record after centuries of enforced silence. Then, the Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed it again. Fragments of Enoch recovered from Qumran Cave 4, written in Aramaic, placing the document well before the Common Era. This was not a medieval invention. It was ancient, copied, and deliberately kept. What the text actually says is not metaphor, and it is not allegory. 1 Enoch chapter 10 delivers a verdict unlike anything else surviving from the ancient world. One watcher is named. One watcher is held responsible. And the formula the text uses does not distribute blame evenly across the group. It concentrates it. It assigns to a single figure the weight of all corruption that followed the descent. In the next several minutes, you will see that name, the specific, forbidden knowledge he transmitted, the exact language the manuscript uses to assign the verdict, and the physical evidence that was already sitting in the archaeological record, waiting to confirm it. If forbidden biblical history is what you find yourself returning to, hit subscribe. Every week, this channel surfaces what was removed and shows you the record that remains. The verdict appears in the 10th chapter of the Book of the Watchers, verses 4 through 8. The manuscript tradition behind that passage runs through the Ge'ez language copies held by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and the translation that brought it into precise English scholarship is R. H. Charles's 1917 Oxford edition, still the foundational reference for the original language terms. The line that matters is this one. The text instructs the Archangel Raphael to bind Azazel and to ascribe to him all sin. Not some sin, not a portion of the blame, all of it. The Ge'ez construction behind that phrase carries a totality that does not soften in translation. It is not a rhetorical gesture. The grammar assigns complete culpability to a single named figure. Azazel is not one member of a guilty group receiving a share of the verdict. He is the named origin point. The text treats him the way a prosecutor treats the architect of a conspiracy. The others followed, but he is where the charge begins and ends. Now unpack what Azazel actually transmitted, because the text is specific. He taught the making of swords and shields and breastplates. He taught the working of metals into instruments of war. And in the same breath, in the same verses, he taught ornamental seduction, the cutting of roots, the use of cosmetics, the arts by which human desire could be manipulated and redirected, weapons and seduction, violence and vanity. The text presents these not as separate corruptions, but as a single package, delivered by one instructor, received by humanity at a specific moment in its development. Here is where the impossible knowledge problem surfaces. The author of this text had no archaeological survey of the ancient Near East. He had no stratigraphic record of when bronze weapons first proliferated across the Levant. He had no access to the material evidence that would be excavated millennia later, showing the precise cultural moment when warfare technology and elaborate personal ornamentation appeared together in the same burial sites, the same settlements, the same layers of human history. Yet he describes exactly that moment, and he names a single source for both developments. Archaeologists working Bronze Age sites across the ancient Near East have documented the simultaneous appearance of sophisticated metal weaponry and elaborate personal adornment, mirrors, jewelry, cosmetic implements, in the same cultural strata. The shift is not gradual. It arrives. The record shows a compression of technological and behavioral change that specialists have spent decades trying to explain through migration patterns, trade routes, and cultural contact. The text of 1st Enoch offers a different explanation, written down before the excavations existed to confirm the pattern it describes. Swords and shields in the ancient manuscript. Bronze Age warfare expansion confirmed by material record. The cosmetic arts named alongside weapons in the same passage. Elaborate personal ornamentation appearing in the same archaeological layer as the weapons. The text does not hedge. It states the origin, names the teacher.
Before we continue, I want to show you something that could completely change how you see the Book of Enoch and what was buried inside it. Most people spend years collecting fragments of knowledge without ever finding the complete picture. That's exactly why we built the complete library. It brings together the Watcher's descent and their forbidden transmissions, the angelic hierarchy and its role in the end time sequence, the soul's journey through death into the intermediate state, and the precise prophetic timeline running all the way to the final judgment into one practical system. If you've enjoyed the teachings we've explored on this channel, you're going to love what's inside. You can find it through the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on your screen. I'll give you a second to do that.
And assigns the verdict. And the verdict is total. Azazel bears all of it. That is the claim the manuscript makes. That is the claim R.H. Charles translated with full access to the Ge'ez source. That is what the Ethiopian Orthodox custodians preserved, while the Western canon buried the book entirely. But the text does not stop with the verdict. It moves immediately to the punishment. And the punishment is where the geography becomes impossible to ignore. The Book of the Watchers names the leader, not by title, by name. 1st Enoch, verses 1 through 8 of the 6th chapter. The manuscript tradition runs through the Ge'ez codices held by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the same custodians who preserved the text while the Western canon sealed it out. R.H. Charles produced the definitive English translation in 1917, working directly from the Ge'ez source material. What he rendered was not mythology. It was a record of a coordinated act. 200 watchers, one binding oath, one mountain. The text identifies the leader as Semjaza. It says he feared the others would lose their nerve, that the weight of the transgression would break the group before the act was committed. So he demanded a collective oath. Every one of the 200 swore it. The Ge'ez term used for that oath is a form of anathema, a word that does not mean a simple promise. It means a curse that falls back on the one who breaks it, a self-binding, a covenant with no exit clause. This is not the vocabulary of folk legend. This is the vocabulary of ancient Near Eastern treaty law. Scholars of the ancient Near East have documented covenant structures from the 2nd millennium before the Common Era, Hittite suzerainty treaties, Assyrian loyalty oaths that follow the exact same architecture. A superior party, a subordinate group, a binding oath, a curse clause invoked against defectors. 1st Enoch's description of the Watcher's oath on the mountain matches that structure with a precision that a late forger working from imagination would have had no reason to replicate and likely no access to. He had no way to know the structure, yet he recorded it accurately. Now, the name. Semjaza. The Ge'ez preserves it without alteration across multiple manuscript lines. Scholars who have worked the etymology, including Michael Knibb, whose 1978 Oxford Critical Edition remains the standard reference, trace the root meaning to a phrase that translates as, "he sees the name." In the theological framework of the text, that is not a casual identifier. To see the name means to possess knowledge of the divine name itself. It marks Samjaza not as a minor figure, but as a being of senior rank who understood exactly what he was doing when he led the oath. And the location is named, explicitly, Mount Hermon. The text says the 200 descended on the summit of Mount Hermon, and there swore the oath. Not a symbolic mountain, not an unnamed high place. Mount Hermon, the specific peak that sits at 9,232 feet above sea level, on what is today the border region between Syria, Lebanon, and the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights. The mountain is real. It is measurable. It is still there, and in its upper sectors, it is still restricted. Military installations occupy the summit ridge. Access to the highest elevations has been controlled by Israeli defense forces since the 1967 war. Sensor arrays and intelligence facilities operate there today. The specific ridge where the text places the oath has been under some form of restricted access for over 50 years. That is not an argument. That is a fact about the geography. The text named the location. The location exists. And the location is closed. First Enoch did not invent a mountain. It named one. And the name has held for 2,500 years. What the text describes next is not an oath and a silence. It is an oath and an immediate consequence. Because once the 200 swore, there was no turning back. And what followed was not a quiet transgression. It was a cascade that ended with the earth itself crying out for intervention. The archangels noticed. That is what the text records. First Enoch, verses 1 through 6 of the 7th chapter, and then the 9th chapter's opening verses. The same Book of the Watchers, the same Ge'ez manuscript tradition, the same R.H. Charles translation of 1917. The sequence is forensic. The Watchers descend, they take wives, the women bear children, and the children grow. The Ge'ez term rendered as giants is gigantes, a transliteration carried into the Ge'ez from the Greek transmission layer. But the underlying concept is not metaphor. It is measurement. The text gives scale. These were beings of physical excess, beings whose appetites outpaced everything the earth could supply. The word gigantes in the ancient world did not mean simply tall. It carried the idea of earth-born excess, of something too large for the world it occupied. The text records what happened when the provisions ran out. The giants consumed everything men had produced. Then they turned on the animals. Then they turned on the men. Then, the text says, they began to drink the blood. This is not symbolic language. The Book of the Watchers is not a parable at this point. It is a report. And the report reaches the archangels. In the 9th chapter, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel look down from the heavenly realm and observe the earth. What they see is recorded in language that functions like a formal complaint filed before a court. The earth, the text says, was filled with blood and unrighteousness. That phrase, blood and unrighteousness, is a legal pairing. In ancient Near Eastern judicial language, blood means unlawful killing. Unrighteousness means the violation of cosmic order. Together, they constitute grounds for a verdict. The archangels do not act on their own authority. They bring the case upward. Now consider what the ancient flood traditions record independently. The Atrahasis epic, preserved in Akkadian cuneiform on tablets held in the British Museum, tablets dated to the 17th century before the Common Era, describes the gods deciding to send a flood specifically because the earth had become too loud, too full of noise and violence. Scholars, including W.G. Lambert and A.R. Millard, who produced the critical edition of Atrahasis in 1969, identified that the noise described was not simply population growth. It was the noise of disorder, of blood, of something gone wrong at a fundamental level. First Enoch names the mechanism. Atrahasis records the same threshold. 2 sources, 2 languages, 2 custodial traditions separated by geography and centuries. They converge on the same trigger. The earth, filled with unlawful violence, demanded a response that reset the world. He had no way to coordinate those traditions, yet they confirm each other with a precision that compilation alone cannot explain. The archangels filed their report. The verdict came, and the sentence that followed was not generalized. It was specific. It named the guilty. It named the location. And it named the duration of the punishment with a precision that has no parallel in any other ancient judicial text. And that precision is where everything becomes harder to dismiss. The sentence was not abstract. It was an address. First Enoch, verses 4 through 15 of the 10th chapter. Book of the Watchers. Ge'ez Manuscript Tradition. R. H. Charles, 1917. The judgment passages are among the most precisely worded sections in the entire text, and what they describe is not a vague divine displeasure. It is a binding order with named parties, named locations, and a measured duration. Azazel first. The text instructs Raphael to bind him, hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness. The location is named Dudael, not a symbolic void, a specific desert. Scholars including George Nicholsburg, whose 2001 Hermeneia commentary on First Enoch remains the most comprehensive critical analysis in English, have traced the name Dudael to a wilderness region associated with rough and jagged terrain, a place of sharp rock and desolation east of Jerusalem. The text says Azazel is to be covered with darkness, that no light shall reach him, that on the great day of judgment he will be cast into the fire, bound, sealed, waiting. The Ge'ez term for sealed in this passage shares its root with the language used in ancient royal imprisonment decrees, documents from the Persian and Babylonian administrative traditions in which a prisoner is not merely confined, but officially closed. The seal is a legal instrument. It means the case is decided. The record is fixed. No appeal is open. Then Semjaza. The text instructs Michael to bind him and his host, the full 200, beneath the hills of the earth. Not above the earth, not at the surface, beneath it. And the duration is specified, 70 generations. That number is not decorative. In the chronological framework the text itself establishes, where a generation is measured against the long lifespans of the pre-flood patriarchs, 70 generations projects a span that lands within calculable range of the first century of the Common Era. Scholars working the internal chronology of the Enochic tradition, including James Vanderkam at Notre Dame in his 1995 study of Enochic chronology, have noted that the 70-generation figure appears to function as a terminal marker, a point at which the sealed judgment reaches its fulfillment. The text was written centuries before that terminal point. It named a duration. The duration was measurable. The ancient writer had no actuarial table for divine chronology, yet the number is there, precise, recorded. And consider what this structure represents at the level of legal architecture. The judgment in First Enoch does not treat the Watcher's transgression as a local crime, a regional offense with regional consequences. It frames it as a cosmic breach. The language of the verdict is universal. The corruption spread from the Watchers to the giants to the earth itself. The sentence therefore applies at every level: the individual, the host, the landscape, the era. This is not the framing of a folk tale. Folk tales punish villains and restore order. This text issues a sentence with a named defendant, a named location, a measured duration, and a specified method of confinement. That is a judicial record. And the record does not end with the binding. It opens into something the text says will come after, a restoration of the earth, a cleansing, a moment when the sealed chambers are finally opened. The judgment was written down. The location was named. The duration was set. And somewhere beneath the hills of the earth, according to the oldest surviving manuscript tradition of this text, the sentence is still running. The Ethiopic manuscripts still sit inside restricted ecclesiastical collections. Right now. The verdict in 1 Enoch chapter 10, ascribe all sin to him, is publicly readable in R. H. Charles's 1917 Oxford edition, page by page, name by name. Mount Hermon's restricted sectors remain closed to civilian access today. The coordinates are on a map. The text is on a shelf. The formula has never been erased. And according to the oldest manuscript tradition we possess, the sentence handed down in that verdict is not historical. It is still running. If the name Azazel means something to you after this, leave it below. We surface what was removed from the record every week. Subscribe if that matters to you.